Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Matthews. I am the program director for Imagine and Newark. And with me today is
Hi guys, I'm Jamie Faltamaccia. I'm the program associate for Imagine Newark and I run our in-school support program.
Great. So we thought that it would be great for us to come on today just to kind of talk more about some concerns that people are having as we are preparing to go back to school. Whether that's going to be in person or virtual or hybrid, a mix of things. I know New Jersey is still trying to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing, but we thought it was important to really talk about some of those concerns that people might be having at this time. So just to kind of go over what we will be discussing, like I said, the concerns about returning to school, normalizing the concerns and anxieties about students returning, the anxieties of the parents, but also the anxiety of the students, and then also how to really help children, your students, coping with various losses as they return to school. So I'll turn it over to Jamie to get us started.
Great. So I really just wanted to normalize that there's been so many ups and downs with the pandemic and all of the news that we're getting. So things are changing on a day-to-day basis, right? The governor is coming on and telling us that schools are reopening and that we're mandated to be in person. And now we're hearing there's like this mixture where parents can opt into a virtual option. Many schools are doing hybrid. So every district and every state is doing things really differently right now. And that's a lot of stress for parents because there's a lot of decisions that they have to make for their children and for themselves. So we think about parents who have children that may be in public or private schools or charter schools, and their schedules could be different, and each school could be handling that differently. So that's making things challenging. We also want to recognize that parents are having their kids return to school in this environment of uncertainty. Like we could have a surge in numbers and children could be back to remote learning all of a sudden. So just trying to live in this age of uncertainty is a lot of stress. So parents have a lot of difficult decisions to make. So that's why we wanted to come on today to really talk about how to make those decisions. So I just want you all to know that like there's no right or wrong answer. Parents may be feeling judged heavily for their decisions because they may have to choose between their children's mental or physical health in terms of bringing their children back to school, whether they want to keep them home or whether they want them to return to in-person or some kind of hybrid program. So there's a lot of anxiety there. And parents who are either working from home have to manage their working from home schedule and also making sure that their children are learning. And then parents who are out working right now have to figure out childcare. So it's a lot of things to think about, and parents do have a lot of decisions to make when it comes to deciding about returning to school.
And I think like a key piece that you mentioned, Jamie, is really about a lot of parents feeling judged for their decisions. So some people
Mm-hmm.
are kind of like operating and making these decisions in silos, like fearful of sharing that information with friends or family members because, what are they going to say with my decision? Because if they did put it out there on social media, just kind of test the waters, some of the feedback they've been getting is really kind of saying like, well, what about this and what about that? And are you considering this and that? And the one thing that we do know with all parents is that they are thinking about the overall welfare and the well-being of their child, right? Or children. It's not, and this is not, like you said, it's not an easy decision to make. This is very difficult because there's so many things and variables in play that you just can't account for because we don't know. We learn more about the virus, but there's still so much we don't know about the virus. We don't presume to be experts at all. We just follow whatever the CDC is saying and whatever's out there. But we don't know. And I know something that has come up is, the amount of people who have been exposed, particularly children, and how they fare with the virus. And like I said, we are not experts. We don't know all the details. We just have seen some data. But although parents may not have fear about their child succumbing to the virus, it does impact their household and who may be, and if there are people in the household who are immune compromised and exposing others to the virus. So especially if there are people who are living with grandparents or elderly individuals. Some people are not the parent, but maybe they're the grandparent of that child, right? Who is now the primary caregiver. So their feelings and thoughts and concerns about that. There's so many different layers and variables that, not everyone is taken into consideration, maybe. but I know that that then impacts like their willingness to have their child or children go to school or not. I know initially Governor Murphy in the state of New Jersey said that schools must return to in-person instruction, but recently announced that families that want to sit out the physical reopening of schools now will have a choice to stay with virtual instruction after all. So some schools are doing hybrid, some schools are doing an A and B schedules. Um, and as you mentioned, if you have children who are in charter school, like one child in charter school, another child in public school, it's kind of like this up and down kind of yo-yo effect that's happening about, you know, what do I do with the one child that's home and the other child that's back in school? Um, so I think that's like where a lot of people are in terms of like their feelings about what's going on right now. Um, and I know there's some reopening plans that you wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said earlier, school is scheduled to reopen between 5 to 6 weeks from now, which isn't a lot of time, and we really don't have that much information. And this information is changing daily. So, I'm sure that the information I'm about to share will probably change by the time that some of you are listening to this. But as of July 29th, we heard about Newark, which is the school district that we primarily work in, and it is the largest district in New Jersey. They did release their plans to reopen. So we heard that families are able to decide if they want to do, like Jocelyn said, the hybrid where they're coming in part-time, or if they're going to just stay home and do remote learning. But if they are coming in, the teachers all must get tested for COVID before they return to work. There's not really going to be any visitors allowed in the building. And if they are, they're required to go through the regular screening process, um, you know, sanitizing everything, wearing masks. The interesting thing that I saw was about the classrooms, how they're set up. They're going to have to be 6 feet apart, or at least 3 feet, I believe, and also have these barriers in between each desk, like plastic or glass barriers in between each student. And then the breakfast and lunch won't be served in the cafeteria. It'll be either delivered to the classrooms or the kids will pick it up. So I thought that that was really interesting to think about the impact that that has, not only on the kids who are used to having all this connection and interaction, but also the teachers and then the parents. Like, how do you support your child who is going into school in this completely new environment? So I know, Jocelyn, do you want to talk a little bit more about those concerns that parents have?
Yeah, I think there are so many different things kind of happening for parents, right? So, you know, there are real downsides to keeping children at home for months longer, including new stresses on families that can result in there's been an increase in domestic violence. There's been an increase in nutritional gaps for those who depend on regular school subsidized meals and lunches. To help out with what's going on at home and to kind of mitigate some of those stressors. There are also educational consequences. So, although in some cases these learning gaps can be made up in the future, you know, there are some things where those are concerns for parents as well about, are my children getting the education that they need, and to kind of keep them on par with where they currently are or where they need to go. Um, Parents also scrambling for childcare. Many parents are returning to work and have to figure out alternative plans to care for their children if they are learning remotely. So that's a concern. And another is, you know, managing the school schedule, right? So some children had a very difficult time. If we think about it, children are used to being in school from, you know, September to June, right? And it's usually a very clean break when the end of the school year happens. And what happened for them last school year is that they were kind of ripped from the peers and the teachers and the staff that they're used to seeing Monday through Friday for a majority of their week, the majority of their day. And so there wasn't this real closure that happened for them, right? And then they were kind of thrown and kind of thrust into this online learning environment. And, you know, sometimes parents had a difficult time understanding that children are used to that continuity and that routine. Even though they might have difficulty with it, it's still something that helps them to kind of keep them regimented. And so I think that kind of like being ripped from that, and then now they went into the summer and now they're going back into school, whatever school looks like for them. So then parents are like, my child had a very difficult time with, you know, online learning, and now we're going back into the classroom, whether it's in person or virtual. How do we really kind of manage that? And then that's a lot of the concern I think that parents have with their children going back, but also this concern and these changes about, you know, how COVID is going to impact what their school looks like period, right? The physical brick and mortar school, but then also how it impacts even virtual learning, if that is going to be the case, and how things look so different now, if there have been a myriad of losses in terms of like school staff, if it has been that there are peers in their classroom who have lost someone due to COVID, and even if it's not a COVID related death that happened, it could be any type of loss that happened over the course of these past few months. You left school, it looked a certain way, it felt a certain way, and now they're going back and it's going to feel and look very different. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
Right. And it's also not just the losses that are physical. So even if a child hasn't experienced a death, as Jocelyn said, there's just like this loss of normalcy and this loss of routine. So we want to talk a little bit about how parents can support their children as they're dealing with all this uncertainty. As we know, children take their cues from their parents. So if we're scrambling and frantic, our children are probably going to be scrambling and frantic because they're looking at us to know how to act and how to respond. So it's so important for parents to model the way that they want their children to feel about returning to school. So making sure that we take the time as parents to have those conversations with our children and to just normalize that, yes, there's uncertainty and there's anxiety, but we're going to take it one day at a time and we're going to do everything we need to do to keep you safe. So there's all these mixtures of emotions, right? There's fear, there's confusion, there's uncertainty. And Jocelyn also mentioned the lack of continuity, how they were ripped from their school year. So they're kind of just entering into this very uncertain world and they're experiencing all of these new losses and just kind of having to roll with it. Kids who may have entered a milestone year, like if they're graduating high school, this year is not going to look the same for them. It's going to look really different. So those expectations that they had are kind of gone. So also parents just need to find other ways to support their kids and to have those conversations and to celebrate those milestones in a different way, or to postpone those celebrations if they need to. So it's also important to note that as parents, we may be grieving ourselves. Like if you had a relationship with that teacher, that administrator, that friend's parent who passed away, you may be sad, and it's important to normalize that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to cry, it's okay to miss that person. Oftentimes as parents, we want to shield our children from those emotions and protect them from them. But the only way that our children are going to learn is by observing us and by seeing how we're doing things.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, like this, if it was a milestone year, but I also think about like children who might have been looking forward to having a particular teacher their next school year. Like I know when I was going, sounds really weird. When I was going from second to third grade, there was a third grade teacher that my older brother had and he loved, and I knew I was supposed to have her that next year. And so I can only imagine like for other kids, you find you hear stories about other teachers and you're like, oh, I can't wait to have teacher so and so, and there's not a guarantee now, right? Like maybe if it is in person, that teacher didn't feel comfortable going back, or it may be unfortunate that that person might have died, and so that then those uncertainties as well is something that children are kind of like contending with also. And then parents, how do you support a child who was literally looking forward to this particular teacher or this particular school year because maybe it was an eighth grade graduation year, maybe it was a high school graduation year, and everything looks completely different.
Right. And I also think about like kindergartners who are entering school for the first time and this is their school experience. It's extremely hard to start school this way because this is not what parents anticipated their child's first year of school to look like too. So we really just want to think about ways to support our kids. One of the things that Jocelyn and I discussed as we were preparing for this is to kind of create a routine. So as she mentioned, children are really used to routines. They're used to going to school typically September to June. They're used to, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So as much of a routine as we can create around the pandemic, the better off our children will be. So something we could do is normalizing like a hygiene routine. Like children get back from school, they put their backpack in a designated place, they take off their shoes, they change their clothes right away and, get cleaned up, and then they can go play or do whatever they need to do. Also things that can, support them in their anxiety, letting them pick out their own masks. I know there's a ton of colors and characters and all different kinds of cool things for the masks. So perhaps if your child really likes a certain color or certain character, they'll be more likely to wear their mask. Although I know that little children especially are having a hard time keeping their masks on.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of questions in the comments, so I just want to make
Okay.
sure that we address those too. So, one of the questions is like, are there things we can say or do for our children to help
Mhm.
them with all of this uncertainty? I think as we consistently check in, and we'll talk
Mhm.
about temperature checks a little bit later, but really asking those questions and not being and showing that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to feel nervous, anxious,
Mhm.
uncertain, because that's the reality. And
Right.
those are the emotions that we are feeling as adults as well. So I can only imagine what it's like for a little person, to not know what it's going to look and feel like. Um, so continue to check in and ask questions of your child. Ask them how they're feeling, as especially as they're getting closer and closer to the day. As Jamie mentioned, having those routines set up now. So start doing them now, right? So that you're preparing your child for whatever the school year is going to like. We don't really know, and things can change from day to day and week to week, as we have seen. But I think trying to set up those routines now, so they, especially for the little ones, for those who are just now going to school for the first time, or even for those first graders who are, now going back, um, what the routine is going to look like, get them back into that. Because if you think about it, it's from March until now, they haven't had any routine really, right? They've been
Mhm.
getting up and probably sitting in front of a laptop or doing their schoolwork that way. So trying to get them back into a routine of getting up at a certain time, going to bed at a certain time, to bring that level of normalcy and routine back to their lives will help. And then during that, you're having conversations, you're talking to them about, how are you feeling about this? What are your thoughts? What are you looking forward to as you go back to school? What are you not looking forward to?
Mhm.
And really kind of normalizing it's okay to have those feelings of worry and concern.
Mhm. Absolutely. As Jocelyn mentioned, checking in is super important. So we call them temperature checks, ironically, not the physical temperature checks, although that's important to monitor your child's temperature. Something we do a lot in our groups is just checking in, like, how are you feeling right now? Like from a 1 through 10, 10 being completely content and calm, one being not so great. Having a child, frequently check in and just let you know where they're at, and normalizing that it's okay if they're at a 10, and what can you do to bring them back to like an 8 or a 7, and talking through the things that help them to feel comforted. So that's really important as well.
And I think even in saying that, as we get back to routine, you'll be able to start seeing more of the signs of your child's anxiety. So, if it's
Mm-hmm.
trouble sleeping, if it is trouble concentrating, seeming more excessively worried or restless or tired, it's hard to know that now because we're all in the midst of what life has now looked like, in the midst of a pandemic. But when you get back to routine, you'll start to see those kind of signs pick, kind of like, be more of like a red light and a red sign about what's happening. So then it helps you too, right? Because then
Right.
you're able to be more in tune with what's happening with your child, because you're getting back to some sort of a routine and you can see what things are sticking out for them. Along with temperature checks, I think it's really important for us as the adults, in their lives, to talk about our own feelings, our own concerns and worries. Because as we do that, then we show that we're a safe place for them and we're a trusted place for them to share their feelings as well. Okay, mom is showing that she's having a hard time too, or that she's concerned or she's worried. And there's ways to do it so that we're not catastrophizing and, and causing them to be overwhelmed, but we want them to know that we have feelings too, that we're in tune with our feelings, and that's okay to share how we feel. It's okay to say, I am a little concerned about the school year, but we're going to do all that we can to make sure that you're safe physically and emotionally. I can understand that you're worried because you're going back and teacher so and so is not there, or teacher so and so has died, or principal so and so, or whoever. And that's okay too. Like, I'm missing that person too, and I miss that we're not going to be able to see him or her this school year. So you want to be able to have those conversations and start having those now, so that when they go back to school, if they are going back physically, they're starting to be prepared for the changes that they're going to experience, not just the physical changes, but then also the emotional changes as well, that might come up for them.
Absolutely. And just to add on, I think it's important, because children do catastrophize, to talk through the what if. So a lot of younger kids have these, what if this happens? What if I get sick? What if you get sick? What if my teacher gets sick? What if we close school again? So letting them talk through those things instead of, just saying, don't worry about that. Because when we as parents hear our children getting really anxious, our gut instinct is to say, oh, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it. But that shuts your child down, and that makes them feel like, okay, well, I'm just living here with my fear and anxiety now. So I think exploring those things, like, all right, what if you do get sick? What's going to happen? We're going to go to the doctor. We're going to make sure you get better. If you need to take medicine, we'll take medicine. You're going to rest and you're going to feel better. So just like having those conversations and letting children talk through what would happen can also be really helpful to make them feel comforted.
Mm-hmm. There was another question about any advice for young kids, first grade self-contained class, switching schools amidst the new school, physical school setup. I think that, and Jamie, you can jump in as well if you have any thoughts, but I think that I'm really talking about it. We can't talk enough. And we want to try to find ways to communicate with our children about their feelings and thoughts about changing new schools, right? It's hard to go into a new school, regardless of a pandemic, right? If we think about it, it's very difficult to change schools because you're learning new people, you're learning a new building, you're trying to figure out your peers, who's going to be my friend, who's not going to be my friend, am I going to like my teacher or not like my teacher? That's already difficult outside of a pandemic, and now things have changed so much. I think the one thing that has kind of helped during this time is that we're all going through this together. It's the one thing we all have in common, right? The ways we're responding to it, the ways we're being impacted are very different. But it's the one thing that we all have in common is that we are going through a pandemic together. So that helps to kind of like ease a little bit of some tension, but we have to expect that there's going to be some natural worries and anxieties about being in this new building and this new space and meeting new people. And so I think having those conversations and asking leading up to that time, how are we feeling? How can we work through some of the scenarios? Sometimes we need to role play and talking about like, so if this happens, what do you do? And so that they feel as prepared as possible going into the school year.
Exactly. And another option is to also teach coping skills. So again, we do this a lot at our groups at Imagine, and adults, we need this just as much as our kids do. So things like taking deep breaths, it sounds really simple, but counting to 10 and taking a deep breath when you're entering into a stressful situation can help to kind of mitigate a little bit of that anxiety. Also visualizing a calm place. So sitting down with your child and talking through a place that they feel really happy, really calm, maybe a place that they go on vacation or a special place in their yard, just a place that they feel happy, and encouraging them to visualize that place when they're starting to feel those worries. Another option is to have some kind of tactile object for them to use for comfort. So especially kids that are a little more fidgety, if they have something that they can hold in their hand, that obviously they're not sharing with anyone else, just to keep them calm and to keep them grounded in all of their stress and worries.
Yeah, I think those are all really good ideas too. And once again, I think truly trying to like start up these routines now, sooner rather than later, not waiting until the week before, but really trying to ease them back into what the school year will feel and look like, I think will be helpful as well to kind of help with anxiety and concerns about the upcoming school year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you had something?
Nope. I was just going to say, I want to shout out parents because it has been incredibly difficult the past few months, and having a child at home and having to deal with the new work schedule and all of this going on is incredibly challenging. And I've seen so many parents doing this with grace, and it's incredibly impressive. So we just want to shout you out. We recognize all the incredible work that you're doing. And, just keep doing what you're doing. You are the experts in your family and of your child, so you know what's best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think another thing that I wanted to say is we really want to help children to stay connected to their classmates and their friends. And then also, because we are a grief support center, we're always talking about the elephant in the room, i.e. the elephant here, about grief and loss, and about these feelings of, It's not just grieving a physical person, but grieving the myriad of losses that they've experienced. But you want them to also feel like they can honor the person who has died, if there has been someone that has died. And if they could do that together with peers in their classroom, but then also if they could do that at home and having a space to kind of like honor that and to talk about it and your feelings about grief and loss at home. Once again, it really is about parents being a safe place and a safe space for children as they're kind of walking through all of this. That's, I feel, is the most important things about having relationships are really built on safety. It's not about, it really is focused on like being safe. So not just physically safe, but also emotionally safe, and knowing that the parent or a caregiver can be that person that they feel safe, that they can unload your emotions and your feelings and anxieties and concerns with, is so incredibly important. Not saying it's easy, not going to downplay the role of a parent and say that parenting at all is easy, but particularly parenting during a pandemic is probably 10 times harder. So I definitely don't want to downplay that. But the one thing that we can do is providing that safe space for children to share their feelings and worries, concerns, anxieties, grief, etc., with those that they love and trust. So I think that is it on our end. I don't know if there are any other questions in the chat.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
Great.
Great.
Thank you guys for listening and watching.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, and I should also mention that if you have any concerns or you have any questions and kind of want to talk to someone else, or if you are a parent who is helping to support a grieving child, we are here for you. You are not alone. Please reach out to us. We want to be able to provide support to you during this time. Continue to take care of yourselves. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.